Ever get that feeling? Like you really want to understand something deeply, but sifting through all that information, it can feel like, I don't know, a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, totally get that.
So that's what we do here. We streamline it. Welcome to the deep dive,
We do the deep dive.
your shortcut to really knowing your stuff. Today, Teddy Atlas.
One of the most, well, I guess, instantly recognizable figures in boxing. I mean, to boxing fans anyway.
Absolutely. We've got excerpts from his autobiography, Atlas from the Streets to the Ring. Really powerful stuff.
A son's struggle to become a man, yeah.
So what we want to do today is see his early life, like how those early experiences, those insights, those formative moments really shaped the man who became this renowned trainer and commentator.
Definitely. We'll be looking at his father's influence, that whole descent into street life, those moments where he had to face consequences, the pivotal time with Cus D'Amato, and then, of course, the very beginning of his own journey as a trainer.
Okay, so let's start with, I guess, the biggest influence early on. His dad, Dr. Theodore Atlas Sr.
So his father, a legendary figure on Staten Island, an old-fashioned doctor, the kind who, made house calls. Hungarian Jewish, raised in the Bronx, always wore a bow tie, kind of rumpled raincoat. And he drove this, well, let's just say well-loved car all over Staten Island, seeing patients.
Wow. Day and night, huh?
Yeah, sounds like it. And what's amazing, it wasn't about the money for him. He
Right.
wouldn't charge patients who couldn't afford it. And even when they could, it was like $5, something symbolic.
Bro.
Sometimes he'd even take like a homemade pie or cookies as payment. Really tells you something about the kind of doctor he was.
So dedicated to caring for the community.
Exactly. And this idea, right, that real commitment, it goes beyond just money. It's about something deeper. That definitely influenced Teddy. I mean, you see it later in how dedicated he was to his own fighters, regardless of their success or how much they were making.
And there's that funny story about his mom calling him Columbo back in the 70s.
Yeah. I love that detail. It really brings his personality to life. That slightly disheveled look, lost in thought, but always focused on helping people. It's almost like a blueprint for the kind of man Teddy would become.
Right. So let's shift gears a bit. Talk about his slide into street life. Dropping out of school, the tension at home.
Tough time for him. Ends up crashing in New Jersey with this guy, Billy. The book paints a pretty bleak picture. Billy's marriage was falling apart. He was into robbery, theft, all sorts of bad stuff.
Not the best environment for a young guy. And then there was that awkward situation with the babysitter.
Right, not exactly a stable, morally upright place. And then the turning point, the gun.
Yeah, that's where things get serious. He takes Billy's gun.
Right. He saw how scared Billy was of going to jail and just, boom, took the gun. The consequences were immediate. Both arrested.
So what happened?
$5,000 bail for Teddy. Billy got out on his own recognizance.
You'd think that would be a wake-up call, right?
You would, wouldn't you? But no. His father, he bails him out. And just 2 nights later, Teddy's back out looking for trouble.
Seriously?
Yep. This time with a friend, John. Ex-football player. Had his own demons. Lost a kidney. Drinking heavily.
Sounds rough.
Yeah. They said they were out to make money, but, reading between the lines, there's a lot more going on there. Deeper stuff, unresolved issues.
And that led to the attempted gas station robbery.
Yeah. John's pumping gas, Teddy grabs the cash, kid tries to stop him, and bang, he fires the gun in the air.
Just like that.
Yep. Reckless,
Wow.
terrifying. Then the interrogation. Teddy trying to act all tough like he didn't know anyone selling 38s.
Did that work?
Got him punched. And the worst part, Billy and John, they both gave statements implicating Teddy.
No way.
Yeah. They walked free, and Teddy's left facing Rikers Island. The cops were playing him, using his fear to get what they wanted. Really manipulative stuff.
That's heavy. It's almost like he had to hit rock bottom before things could change. Speaking of tough lessons, there's that incredible story about the tire iron incident and his father's approach to accountability.
Oh, man. That story is brutal. So Teddy gets in a fight, ends up with a huge gash on his head from a tire iron, goes to his father's office, bleeding all over the place, and his dad makes him wait 3 hours with the other patients.
3 hours, bleeding. What was he thinking?
It's hard to say. Maybe it was a twisted form of tough love, or maybe in his own way he was trying to teach Teddy a lesson he wouldn't forget.
And then he refuses to use Novocaine for the stitches. 15 stitches without any painkiller.
It's almost unbelievable, his reasoning. If he's going to live like this, he should know the way this kind of life feels.
Oh.
It's a harsh, almost cruel statement, but it reveals a lot about his father's mindset.
Wow. So even before Rikers, he'd already experienced some pretty extreme consequences.
Definitely. It's like his father in his own way, was preparing him for the harsh realities of the world.
Now, the bus ride to Rikers, that seems like a turning point.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about his father's disappointment, the weight of those expectations, that yearning for a loving family like in the movies, and then the Lou Rawls song.
You'll never find another love like mine.
No, I'll see you when I get there.
Yeah.
Usually it's an upbeat song, but in that moment, on that bus, it took on this whole different meaning. It's like the reality of his situation really hit him.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then the arrival at Rikers.
Stripped down, searched, given those blue prison clothes, the book describes it as a dehumanizing experience.
I bet. But amidst all that, he meets brother Tim McDonald.
Yeah. A Franciscan friar, known as the Brother of the Rock, knew Teddy's uncle a bit, had been watching him through a one-way mirror.
Seriously?
Yep. And when they finally meet face to face, Brother Tim doesn't hold back. You belong in here, Teddy. You're a dangerous person. No sugarcoating, just straight up truth.
Wow. How did Teddy react to that?
Surprisingly well. In that crazy environment, Brother Tim's honesty was like a breath of fresh air. Teddy knew he could trust him. And later, as a trainer, Teddy would use that same approach with his fighters. Tell them the truth, even if it hurt.
Makes sense. It's about building trust, being straight up.
Exactly. And there's this telling moment in the chapel. Brother Tim sees right through Teddy's act, trying to be the good guy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. He challenges him, makes him question his motives. Even after Teddy's dad bails him out, Brother Tim stays worried, thinking he'll fall back into his old ways.
So it's like brother Tim saw something in Teddy that Teddy didn't even see in himself. And this is all before he even steps into a boxing ring, right?
Right.
So then, after Rikers, boxing comes into the picture through Kevin Rooney.
His childhood friend. They met through the Police Athletic League as kids. Kevin had won the Golden Gloves, pretty big deal. And he was now living and training with Cus D'Amato up in Catskill.
Ah, the legendary Cus D'Amato.
The one and only. So, Kevin reaches out to Teddy, sees he's in trouble, heading down a bad path, says, come to Catskill, get away from all this.
A chance to turn things around. And Cus was semi-retired at this point, right?
He had this deal with the police, rented a gym above the station for $1 a year, mostly trained underprivileged kids. It was more of a passion project for him than anything else.
So Teddy arriving there, it was fate, almost.
Yeah, you could say that. And Cus, he had this whole philosophy about fear, saw it as the biggest obstacle to learning.
Interesting. Most people try to avoid fear.
Right. But Cus, he believed you could harness it, turn it into an ally. Like he used to compare it to a deer's adrenaline when it's being chased.
Makes sense.
So Teddy's up in Catskill, and the routine's strict. Morning training, chores, evening gym work.
Sounds intense. And what was Cus like as a trainer?
He had his own style. He'd often sit in this folding chair, demonstrating techniques with his hands, always emphasizing the science of boxing, hitting without getting hit. And Teddy picked it up fast.
He was a natural, huh?
It seems so. Then, Jim Jacobs, Cus's business partner, he steps in to manage Teddy's career. Cus didn't have a manager's license.
Oh, I see.
So Cus was the guru. Jacobs and Bill Caton, they were the money men. And Teddy, he goes on to win the Adirondacks Golden Gloves, knocking out every opponent on the way to the title. But of course, there's still that sentencing date hanging over his head.
Yeah, can't escape the past that easily.
No. And then, during one fight, Teddy starts having back pain, wins the fight, but it's a close one. Cus sees it, tells him to get it checked out by a doctor. But Teddy, he's hesitant. Maybe scared of what they'll find. Maybe not fully committed to this new life yet.
So what happens?
He eventually goes back to Staten Island.
Yeah.
But even after a year with Cus, he's still got this anger inside him. Describes himself as walking dynamite.
Oh, boy.
There's this story about his boxing ring getting lost and found. Not once, but twice.
Really?
Yeah. And he gets this feeling that Sean, a guy he fought before, took it as a sign, like he disapproved of Teddy's lifestyle.
That's pretty spooky. So he's back on Staten Island, full of pent-up energy, not quite sure where he fits in.
Right. And then two kids approach him, Joe the Blade Slattery and Freddie Coop. They want him to train them.
That's the beginning of his training career.
Exactly. It's like this unexpected detour. He's supposed to be dealing with his legal troubles, but instead he takes on these two kids.
And he's serious about it, too. He takes them up to Cus's place in Catskill.
Yeah. Gives them structure, stability, a taste of family life, something they probably didn't have much of.
He was more than just a trainer to them, wasn't he?
Definitely a mentor. Morning and evening sessions, working with pros and amateurs, but also taking the time to talk to these kids, guide them through their problems. The story of Maine Moore really illustrates this.
The quiet kid who kept disappearing from the gym.
Yeah. Teddy saw himself in Maine, remember being bullied as a kid. He shared his own experiences, told him about the time he stood up to a bully with a lunch tray.
Powerful stuff.
It was about empowering Maine, giving him the tools to fight back, not just in the ring, but in life.
So then we have the Apollo Boxing Club in the Bronx, run by Nelson Cuevas.
That was a whole other world. Latin music, cigar smoke, gambling, the rumble of the elevated train overhead. A real melting pot, full of energy, but rough around the edges.
And Teddy becomes the matchmaker there.
Yep. The only white guy who didn't speak Spanish.
That must have been a challenge.
It was. Everyone was trying to hustle, exaggerating their fighter skills, lying about their experience. But Teddy, he learned to read between the lines, to see through the BS.
Sounds like he was developing a real instinct for people.
He was. And he starts this fighter of the night tradition at the Apollo. Maine Moore was the first one to get it. It wasn't just about winning. It was about recognizing effort, heart.
So things are starting to look up for Teddy. He's finding his purpose. His relationship with his father is improving.
Yeah. There's this nice little scene where Teddy fixes his dad's car. The old man's happy, sees his sons off the streets doing something positive.
But then, the tragedy with his brother, Tommy.
Yeah. Tommy had his own troubles, did time on Rikers. He had this look in his eyes, hollow, haunted. And then, the flat tire incident.
Sets off a whole chain of events, right?
Yeah. Tommy acting strange, the family gathering at the house, Uncle Frank's story, and then the phone call from Ralph Metz at the funeral parlor.
Tommy had killed their grandmother.
It's devastating. Teddy sees Tommy sleeping and just knows. His father's worst fears realized.
Awful. So against this backdrop of family turmoil, Mike Tyson enters the picture.
Right. Bobby Stewart calls Cus, tells him about this incredible young fighter from a reform school. Cus wants Teddy's opinion, and we're introduced to Don Shanager, who credits Teddy with saving his sons from a life of crime.
It's all connected, isn't it?
Definitely. So they set up this one-day audition for Tyson. They want to see what he's made of, his character. The stakes are high for Tyson. It's a chance to escape reform school, avoid a future in Brownsville.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah. And during the sparring session, Tyson just explodes. Raw power, aggression, but totally unrefined.
Sounds intense.
It was. And then there's this awkward dinner at Cus's house. Tyson, trying to be helpful, ends up lifting the whole table while getting Camille a fork.
Oh, no.
Funny thing is, Cus doesn't even flinch. He's so focused on Tyson's potential, he doesn't even notice the chaos.
That's incredible. It really shows how much he believed in Tyson from the get-go.
Exactly. And it's kind of sad thinking about Bobby Stewart. He was the one who discovered Tyson, brought him to Cus. Cus promised him he'd be involved, but in the end, he got very little recognition, no real reward after Tyson became champion.
That's a shame. But that happens sometimes, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. The boxing world can be pretty ruthless.
So the training with Tyson begins, but even early on, you can see the volatility, that potential for trouble.
Yeah, like that exhibition fight at the Apollo. Tyson's supposed to be taking it easy, wearing headgear and big gloves.
Yeah.
But he ends up knocking out this Spanish kid, almost starts a riot.
Yeah.
Nelson had to call it a draw to calm things down. It was a glimpse of the power Tyson had, even as a teenager. Then there's the time he claims he broke his hand during sparring.
Really?
Teddy knew it was all mental. He pushed Tyson, made him keep sparring, teaching him about mental toughness.
Smart. You can't let fear control you in the ring.
Exactly. And Teddy wasn't just training these kids in boxing. He was taking them out to places like the James Wee Shopping Center, trying to give them a sense of normalcy, be a positive influence in their lives.
He was feeling a void for them, like a father figure?
He was. And there's that funny story about him trying to ask Elaine out for the first time at the pizzeria they'd take the kids to.
Oh, that's sweet.
And even Nadia, one of his trainees, almost asked him out at the gym, but he had to leave early.
She must have really cared about him.
She did. But things weren't all rosy. There were disagreements with Cus, like the situation with Kevin Rooney's fight against Arguello. Teddy knew Kevin wasn't ready, was injured, but Cus insisted the fight go ahead. Kevin got knocked out. Teddy was furious. It was a turning point, the first real crack in his relationship with Cus.
They had different philosophies, I guess.
They did. And on top of all this, Teddy's life was getting complicated. He was getting married, expecting a kid, still looking after Rooney, Tyson, all the other young fighters.
A lot on his plate. And then there's the story of Jeff Amen.
Yeah, this 19-year-old kid from Catskill.
Yeah.
Paralyzed in a car accident. Doctors said he'd never walk again.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. But Teddy, he refused to accept it. He started visiting Jeff in the hospital, wouldn't give up hope. And he did these unconventional exercises with him, just asking Jeff to try and stop his legs from falling.
Sounds almost impossible.
It did. But, incredibly, Jeff started to get some movement back in his toes.
Really?
Yeah, it defied the doctor's expectations. It shows how powerful belief can be, how much the mind can influence the body.
That's amazing.
It is. And we also get a glimpse of Elaine's strength in that confrontation at the gas station. She stands up to those guys, defends Teddy without hesitation. You can see how much she loves him.
Definitely a tough lady. But the problems with Cus regarding Tyson, they just kept growing.
Yeah. Cus was all about winning, pushing Tyson hard, maybe too hard. Teddy was more concerned with discipline, building character.
Different priorities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when Tyson started acting up, throwing milk cartons at school, Teddy suspended him from the gym. But Cus, he brought him right back and had Rooney train him instead.
That must have felt like a betrayal.
It did. Teddy felt undermined, disrespected. He was so angry, he went and got Bobby Cargioli's gun.
Oh, no.
He confronted Cus outside the gym, threatened him, told him to stay away from his family. A messy, painful break.
So that was it, the end of their relationship.
Pretty much. But despite all this drama, Teddy was still there for Jeff Amen. Helped him get into the swimming pool, even though Jeff was terrified. And later, he pushed Jeff to walk without his cane.
How did that go?
It was a struggle, but it led to this emotional phone call between them. It was a huge step for Jeff, both physically and mentally. Even Michael Moorer, years later, paid tribute to Jeff by wearing trunks with his name on them during a fight in Germany.
That's really touching.
It is. And then there's the story of Carmen Tharp, the dancer Teddy trained. A bit of a diva, even had special requests for her nails during hand wrapping. But it shows how versatile Teddy was as a trainer.
He could adapt to anyone.
He could. And then there's Chris Reed, quiet guy, serious, but a knockout puncher. Struggled with alcohol, though. Teddy helped him get sober, and they went to England to train for a title fight.
Sounds tough.
It was. Spartan conditions, training in this old gym above a bar. Teddy even ended up fighting off some bouncers who were hassling Reed.
Wow, always the protector.
That's Teddy. Sadly, Reed's father passed away just before the fight, a heart attack after a bone marrow transplant.
So much tragedy in his life.
There is. And even after Reed, there's his young son Philip, who asked Teddy to train him. The cycle continues.
Passing on the torch. And we also hear about Donnie Lalonde and the attempted poaching by a manager with mob ties.
Yeah. Teddy was all in with Lalonde, dedicated. But the manager wanted to cut a shady deal, discredit Lalonde to get out of his contract. Teddy refused, wouldn't play dirty.
Another example of his integrity.
Definitely. He turned down chances to train other big names, Pazienza, Taylor, Whitaker, because of his loyalty to Lalonde. And Lalonde ended up winning the light heavyweight title, even got a big money fight with Sugar Ray Leonard.
Teddy missed out on a lot of money by sticking to his principles.
He did. But it shows what kind of man he is.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that incident with Donnie Poole and his elderly neighbor. Elaine overhears it, gets upset about the noise. Teddy, he gets angry, wants revenge, but ultimately chooses his family over violence.
Growth. Right.
Exactly. And then there's the whole experience of filming Night in the City in Poland. Tough conditions, poverty, lots of drinking. Teddy had to teach Willem Dafoe how to box, choreograph the fight scenes.
So he's branching out.
He is. And he doesn't hold back. Tells Dafoe to stop smoking, calls out a Polish actor who gets too rough during rehearsal. He even has a deep conversation with the director about the ending of the fight scene, showing a real understanding of storytelling and character.
Wow, he's got a lot of talents.
He does. And then, out of nowhere, Sammy Gravano, the mobster, asks Teddy to train him at Gleason's gym.
Sammy, the bull Gravano. Seriously?
The one and only. He and his driver, Louis Cicenti, were a strange pair. Teddy agreed to do it as a favor, but he quickly realized that Sammy was applying their boxing talks to his own life, his criminal activities.
That's chilling.
It is. They would talk about control, discipline, fear. And later, when Sammy turned state's evidence, it all made sense. It's like Teddy was inadvertently giving him advice on how to survive in the mob world.
Wow. So he was training a mobster.
He was. And there's this touching story about Sammy's son, Gerard, who wanted to be a fireman but was scared of his dad's reaction. Teddy empathized with him. But then Sammy's wife, Deborah, casually mentions that there's a contract out on Teddy. Yeah, the danger was real. But Teddy, he still offered to train Gerard, showed real compassion.
That's incredible. He was risking his life to help this kid.
He was.
Yeah.
And there's this incident at the gym. A fighter wants to quit because of a sore wrist. Teddy gives him this tough love speech, talks about how his father used to say, if you're sick, don't show me. If you're hurt, don't show me. It was about pushing through pain, both physical and emotional.
Resilience, right.
Exactly. And then Teddy's father gets sick, misdiagnosed at the hospital. Teddy's furious, heartbroken. He wants to sue, but it's his father's own hospital, so he can't.
What a terrible situation.
It was. And in his father's final moments, all he wanted was his medication. It's a really sad, intimate detail.
So Teddy loses his father, but he keeps going, still training Moore and Shannon Briggs.
He does.
Yeah.
Even on the day his father dies, he spends the morning with him and then drives to Briggs' fight. He tells Moore, we do what we have to do. It's like he's channeling his father's stoicism.
Wow. So we're into the Michael Moore era now, the lead up to the Foreman fight. Moore wins a fight, but he's not taking it seriously enough, so Teddy sets up a mini camp.
Yeah, Moore's not happy about it. And then there's Flem, this older guy, ex-cop, who's always hanging around Moore. Teddy thinks Moore is looking for a sense of belonging, some kind of brotherhood he never had.
Interesting.
And Moore, he ends up leaving for Palm Springs early, against Teddy's orders. Teddy tries to stop him at the airport, but it's no use.
So he quits as Moore's trainer.
He does. Walks away from a $200,000 payday. Elaine's not happy. Again, Teddy, she says. But he can't compromise his principles.
Tough call.
It was. But then there's this fight at a restaurant. Teddy defends Briggs against a bunch of guys. The story gets blown out of proportion, but it impresses Moore.
Teddy always has his fighters' backs.
Always. And he had these strict rules for Moore, especially about women, before a fight. It was Cus's philosophy, no distraction. It does. But Moore was unpredictable. He'd do things to test Teddy, push his buttons. Like one time he runs a mile to avoid breaking curfew.
Seriously.
Yep. Teddy thought he was trying to shift the blame for a potential loss. And then the Holyfield fight in Vegas. The pressure was immense. Teddy sees a poster of Tyson. All those memories come flooding back. He even tries to find a lucky sign at the roulette table.
Looking for any edge he can get.
Exactly. And then Tommy shows up, fresh out of prison. Teddy's angry, but Tommy just wants to congratulate him. It's complicated.
Family, right.
Yep. And in the dressing room before the fight, Moore's playing gangster rap, Teddy's trying to focus. They're on completely different wavelengths.
Yeah.
During the fight, Teddy's yelling instructions, frustrated with Moore's passivity. There's a whole different vibe from Holyfield's corner.
Night and day.
Exactly. And there's this gambler, Roger King, sitting behind Teddy's family, betting on whether Teddy can motivate Moore to win.
Wow, that's wild.
It is. And the commentator, Jim Lampley, he calls their relationship a marriage. It's intense, volatile, but there's a deep connection there.
A real love-hate thing.
You could say that. And Teddy, he's fighting his own demons during the fight, trying not to blame Moore if things go wrong. After the fight, he impulsively puts $100 in a slot machine and wins.
A sign, maybe?
Maybe. And then he gets 5 dozen red roses, a reminder of his father. He even runs into some wise-ass kids who start teasing him, but then congratulate him on the win.
So maybe things are turning around for him?
Maybe. And then the negotiations for the Foreman rematch. Complicated. Lots of money involved. Teddy and Moore even offered to take less money to make it happen.
They really wanted that fight.
They did. And Moore, he had this thing about cleanliness. Like, he got really mad at a Korean guy for not cleaning a clipper properly.
Wow, a bit obsessive, huh?
Yeah. And they watched Foreman's fight against Axel Schultz, hoping Foreman would win so they could get the rematch. And then, the Night of Champions, Moore defends his title against Francois Botha. Tyson's fighting Holyfield on the same card. It's the first time Teddy's been involved in a Tyson fight since leaving Catskill.
Must have been strange.
It was. Teddy was ready for trouble, prepared for a confrontation with Tyson's camp. He even calls out a writer who's on Don King's payroll.
Always standing up for what he believes in.
Always. Moore wins the fight, but he fractures his jaw. And then the news comes in, Holyfield beat Tyson.
Like upset?
Huge. And then Don King and Robert Shapiro, they call Teddy, want to work with him. Teddy tells them to get lost. No way he's working with them.
He's got his principles.
He does. And then Moore calls, wants Teddy back. Teddy's disappointed, feels betrayed, but he agrees to train him again.
So they patch things up.
Sort of.
Yeah.
But Moore starts testing him again, pushing him. It's a rough time. They have a heart-to-heart, try to work things out, but the damage is done.
So what happens?
We'll have to wait for part 2 to find out.
Oh, come on. You can't leave us hanging like that.
That's all the time we have for today.
Okay, fine. But next time, we're finishing this story.
I promise.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. Until next time, keep digging.
Keep learning.